All right, so this Knife Thoughts video is going to be on this knife, and this is the Vosteed Labrador. And first of all, this knife was sent to me by Vosteed, so thank you to everyone there for sending this knife along. I have enjoyed getting to check out the knives from this newish company, and it seems like everyone there is really excited about the knives and getting them into people's hands. So thank you to Vosteed for sending this knife for review. But let's get right into it here, because this is a knife that when I saw it, I was interested because it is a longer knife. So I have a couple other Vosteed knives. I'll show you a couple of them right now. The first Vosteed knife, well actually the first folding Vosteed knife I got is this Nightshade. So not a small knife, but definitely a little shorter than the Labrador. Really cool knife, has a historical design inspiration. So check out my video and article on that if you're interested. And then here is the Raccoon. I do have an unboxing of this, and I have a full review coming soon. So those are the two that I've had so far, but as you can see, those are both, not small knives, but not large knives either. I guess medium sized. And for modern knives, I do tend to prefer a longer knife, usually in the 3.5 inch blade range, blade length range to 4 inches, sometimes a little bit more. And so this is in that range. You can see it's got a pretty solid blade there, about 3.75 inches of blade length. And so it also has a really solid sized handle. If you watch my channel, you know that I think a simple handle makes for an ergonomic handle. And this is a pretty simple handle. You can see you do have somewhat of a palm swell here. Now there's this upturn towards the butt of the handle and a flat area, but actually, even with my wide hands, I can get all 4 fingers within this main grip area from here to here really easily. No trouble with that at all. So, my pinky doesn't sit on this, and I don't think yours will either. Like I say, I do have wider hands. So it's really comfortable in the hand, and overall, even being a long design, it's a relatively slim design. So a lot of times when you get a bigger knife, they tend to also be taller and also sometimes wider. And this isn't that. It's nice and slim in, tallness, and also, it's a pretty slim knife in width. So it's easy to carry for being a larger knife. And for me, I have wide hands but short fingers. So I don't really, benefit from a knife being tall in this direction. It doesn't make the grip better, and in fact I prefer a little bit of a slimmer knife like this. This knife feels really good in my hand. I've used this knife a good bit since getting it, and I think it's a really ergonomic handle. On top of that, I have this black micarta version, and there's definitely some sculpting to it. So I'm going to show you from the back here. You can see that it's not just flat. There's some sculpting from side to side of the handle. And that combined, you can actually see that in the lines of the micarta here also. And that combined with the fact that they are full micarta scales makes it pretty comfortable, but you get some good grip from that micarta also. Now, also on the clip, also on the handle, there is a deep carry pocket clip. It's not that deep carry because there is, maybe 1/4 of an inch up to 1/2 an inch that sticks out above the clip from your pocket. But that's not something that's a huge deal to me. It does bend over, so it slides into your pocket pretty deeply with the clip itself. One thing with this clip, I do think that the lip of the clip could sit a little bit higher. On jeans with a thicker pocket and maybe like work pants and stuff, I have had a little bit of trouble sliding it into my pocket without really thinking about making sure that the fabric, the cloth of the pocket actually slides under that. So I do think that this lip could stick up just a little bit more, and I don't think that it would hurt the ergonomics much either, to be honest. That lip sits pretty low. I'll give you a comparison even to the Raccoon. So this is the Raccoon. You can see that the lip of the clip on the Labrador sits quite a bit lower than that on the raccoon. So if the Labrador sat like this raccoon clip, I think it would be about perfect. I don't know if that's something that's intentional, that's across all of these, or if it's just one on mine, you know, my particular example of the Labrador, but, you know, I'd like to see it more like on the raccoon. But, you know, I did fumble to slide it into my pocket a few times, but it's not like it made a huge deal for carry. You know, if you're not taking it in and out of your pocket all the time, it won't be a massive deal. Just something to be aware of, at least on my example. Now, moving on to the blade, I really like the design of the blade. This is a really classic drop point blade shape. You can see it has a pretty much full flat grind, you know, excluding this little area here. And it has some nice straight edge and then a nice gradual belly to a very usable tip. This is just a really classic blade shape. And it's something that's good for pretty much any type of use. Used it for normal EDC stuff like opening boxes, cutting cardboard a little bit, and I actually used it to mark boards for building a chicken coop quite a bit. So worked for all of that really well, and I think that this classic drop point blade shape also looks good. It's just, like I said, very classic. Now, it is made of 154 cm steel, which is an interesting choice because my understanding is that 154 cm is an American steel and these are made in China. But, you know, the company itself is American based, I believe, but they are made in China. So 154 cm, not a super steel at this point in the game of knives here, but not a bad steel either. It's a steel that I'm pretty used to. I use it on a ProTech knife a lot. And so not a super steel, not something that's necessarily a selling point, I think, at this point, but it is something where, you know, it's a very reliable steel. So I haven't had any issues with it. To be honest, I haven't sharpened this knife. I have stropped it a little bit. It does need sharpened from, you know, scraping the tip along the boards to mark them for cuts. But I think that 154 cm is a fine steel for an EDC knife that's not super expensive, and it's going to hold an edge relatively well and sharpen relatively easily. This knife has held its edge pretty well, you know, not again like a super steel, but certainly well enough. And I use lower end steels than 154 cm all the time. So I think it's more than enough for EDC. One last thing here about the grip that I wanted to mention is I actually can use this choil as a forward finger choil. I didn't find myself using it at all in my use, but if it's something where you like a forward finger choil, I think you will be able to use this. A lot of times these are a little bit too small for my thick fingers, but this one I could use, I just didn't really find myself using it. Now moving on to the deployment of this knife, this actually has at least 3 different methods. So you can see this has a thumb stud, it has a back flipper, and it has a front flipper. Now, you know, I was thinking about when I was using this, how am I actually opening it in use when I'm not doing it with intention, doing it to try it out and everything. And I pretty much always used the back flipper, and the back flipper, it works perfectly. This knife is very, very smooth. It is on ball bearings, and you can see it's very much drop closed, smooth, and very easy to flip with that flipper. It also has no blade play. It hasn't developed any. It didn't come with any, either side to side when unlocked or forward and back when locked. So very nice action with that back flipper. I do think that the detent could be a little bit stronger. I think that the detent is a little stronger on the nightshade. So the detent, you know, maybe a little bit stronger would be ideal. And I think that that would help with the front flipper opening method. But the thumb stud opening method certainly works fine also. You can definitely use that if you're trying to open it a little bit more slowly, or if you just prefer that, you can do it with your thumb. You can do it with your middle finger. Not as good with that one, but I'll show you again. Yeah, kind of fumbling that one, but you can definitely do it. The thumb stud works fine. Now, the front flipper on this, there's a couple things here. First of all, I am not a huge front flipper person. I have recently kind of been converted by this knife, the Civivi Sokoke. which I do have a video on that, so you can check that out. But I have not liked some front flippers in the past, and this knife has a front flipper that I think could be a little bit easier to use if designed differently. Now, even with that, I think that being that this is a longer knife, it doesn't necessarily lend itself as well to front flipping. So you can see that I can do it, but it's not super intuitive for me. I have to really get to the top of this knob and, you know, really kind of fling my thumb up. And I think that that's partly because it is such a long knife. I think that front flippers tend to be, you know, in the small to medium size range, and that makes them a little bit easier to just basically get your thumb over. You know, when you hold the knife, it's easier to get your thumb over a knife if it's a little bit shorter, not quite as tall. And then the second thing is this front flipper tab here rounds backwards towards the pivot, or towards the midline of the knife. And I don't think that that makes it easier. In fact, I think that that makes it harder to flip. So I'll show you a comparison again to this Civivi Sokoke. This knife is designed by Ray Laconico. This knife is designed by Yui Dong. And they both have great designs. They're both pretty prolific in, you know, bringing designs to market with production companies. So not that I'm saying, you know, how to design a knife, but I do think, for me at least, this straight style of front flipper is easier to get a hold of than this rounded style. So it just takes a little bit more, I guess, kind of up and down. So I have to push this way and also kind of this way to get it to open, whereas the straight is just to the side. So I do think they could have made this straight. You know, so this could have been designed to be straight, because if you look in, it would just basically go along with the back of the knife. Whoop, now I'm messing that one up. Like it does on the Civivi Sokoke. And unlike the Civivi Sokoke here, which has a normal blade stop, this has an internal blade stop, so that wouldn't really change it either. So I do think it would have been possible to have this be straight up versus rounded, and it would just make it easier for me to flip it with the front flipper style. But again, I think that a front flipper is better, you know, used on a shorter knife. But I don't think that this knife would necessarily be better as a shorter knife with a better front flipper, or with an easier to use front flipper. I like that this knife is long. I wouldn't really change the size of this knife. I think that this knife is perfectly fine with just the normal back flipper and the thumb stud. And honestly, in use, when I was carrying and using this knife, I kind of basically just acted like the front flipper wasn't there. Now, when you're just opening and closing it for fun, certainly you can switch to that front flipper. But in normal use, I think that this is a great knife. It's a great design for actually using. That doesn't really need that front flipper. So I have enjoyed this knife. I think if you're looking for a longer EDC knife that does have, you know, a nice slender blade and handle, so it's not super obtrusive in your pocket when you're carrying it, I think that the Vosteed Labrador is a good option. It is about $85, so it's not super budget friendly, but it is, you know, under $100, and these days that's pretty much where the budget end of things lies in the knife market. So I'm going to show you a couple comparisons, size comparisons to some EDC classics. There is the Benchmade Griptilian full size, and here is the Spyderco Native 5, and then also kind of a modern EDC classic, the Civivi Elementum. So you can see that the Labrador is quite a bit bigger than the Elementum. And like I say, I do appreciate that. I like a longer knife. I like a larger knife. I think that the blade design on this is really classic. It makes for a very usable blade shape, and the handle is very comfortable. I've really enjoyed getting to check out this knife. Thank you to Vosteed for sending it. As always, make sure you subscribe to my channel if you like videos like this. Click the bell and select all so you know when I do post new videos. Check out my other social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Knife Thoughts, and my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.